Our story doesn't begin in a gleaming laboratory, but in the heart of a ferocious lightning storm. On the night of July 10, 1856, in the small mountainous village of Smiljan, in what is now Croatia, the sky was a battlefield of thunder and electricity. In a modest parson's house, a mother was in labor. As the storm reached its terrifying crescendo, the midwife, watching the heavens tear themselves apart, saw an omen. Wringing her hands, she declared, "This child will be a child of darkness." But the mother, Juka Mandic, exhausted and resolute, looked at her newborn son and uttered a rebuttal that would become a prophecy. "No, he will be a child of light." That child was Nikola Tesla. And from his very first breath, his life was intertwined with the raw, untamable power of electricity. This dramatic entrance was a fitting prelude to a life that would be anything but ordinary. A life perpetually suspended between the shadows of obscurity and the brilliant, blinding light of genius. Tesla's childhood was marked by a tragedy that would shape his sensitive psyche forever. At just 5 years old, he witnessed his beloved older brother, Dane, a boy of immense promise, be thrown from a horse and killed. The loss was catastrophic for the family, and for young Nikola, it became a haunting, internal ghost. He was plagued by nightmares and a deep-seated sense of guilt, as if he were somehow responsible. This trauma seemed to unlock something profound and unusual within his mind. He began to experience vivid, uncontrollable visions. These weren't mere daydreams. They were full sensory hallucinations, accompanied by blinding flashes of light that would momentarily blot out reality. He would see detailed scenes, places, and objects as if they were physically before him, often unable to distinguish what was real from what was conjured by his own brain. For most, this would be a debilitating condition. But for Tesla, it became his most powerful tool. He discovered he possessed a form of eidetic, or photographic memory, a gift he inherited directly from his inventive mother. Juka, despite having no formal education, was a mechanical savant in her own right. She invented and crafted small household appliances, memorizing complex recipes and textile patterns with ease. She could recite entire books in different languages. This ability to hold and manipulate images with perfect clarity was the seed she planted in her son. Tesla learned to control his visions. He began to build his inventions inside the workshop of his mind. He would conceptualize a machine, visualize every single component, every gear, every bolt, every winding of copper wire. And then, in his imagination, he would set it running. He would let these mental models operate for weeks, mentally observing them for wear and tear, identifying points of failure, and perfecting the design, all without ever sketching a single line on paper. He later explained this astonishing process himself. "Before I put a sketch on paper, the whole idea is worked out mentally. In my mind, I change the construction, make improvements, and even operate the device. Without ever having drawn a diagram, I can give the measurements of all parts to workmen, and when completed, all these parts will fit, just as certainly as though I had made the actual drawings. It is immaterial to me whether I run my machine in my mind or test it in my shop." His father, a stern Orthodox priest, had a different path mapped out for Nikola, the clergy. But the boy's mind was wired for mechanics and mathematics, not scripture. A fierce battle of wills ensued. The tension came to a terrifying head when, as a teenager, Tesla contracted cholera. He was bedridden for 9 months, so close to death that his family had given up hope. In a moment of desperate bargaining, his father made a promise. If Nikola survived, he could go to the finest engineering school in the world. Miraculously, Tesla recovered. His father, true to his word, sent him to the technical college in Graz, Austria. It was here that the child of light truly began to awaken. He developed an almost inhuman work ethic, studying from 3 a.m. until 11 p.m., 7 days a week. Professors grew alarmed, fearing he would literally work himself to death. His mind was a marvel. He could perform integral calculus in his head and was fluent in 8 languages. He was, for a time, the perfect student. But a dark seed was planted in Graz. It was there he first saw a Gramme dynamo, a direct current machine. When the professor demonstrated how its commutator sparked and bristled, he declared it a fundamental flaw, an inefficiency that could be overcome. He became obsessed with the idea of a perfect motor, one that ran on a different kind of current, one that didn't fight itself. The idea of alternating current began to flicker in his mind. Yet this period of intense focus ended not with a degree, but in disgrace. He developed a ruinous addiction to gambling, losing his entire tuition money. Ashamed and unable to face his family, he dropped out, severed all ties, and disappeared. His friends, hearing nothing, assumed he had drowned in a nearby river. Nikola Tesla, the brilliant student, was officially dead to the world. He drifted through Europe, a ghost, with a transcendent idea, working as an electrician, his mind constantly churning, searching for the key that would unlock his vision. The storm child was about to unleash his lightning upon the world. The bitter New York air in 1884 was thick with more than just coal smoke. It was charged with ambition and the promise of a new era. Nikola Tesla stepped off the boat onto American soil, a man possessed by a revolutionary idea. In his pocket, he carried a mere 4 cents. In his mind, he carried the blueprint for the future of electricity. He had come to meet his hero, the wizard of Menlo Park, Thomas Edison. He carried with him a letter of introduction that was little more than a scribbled note on a piece of paper, but it was enough to secure him an audience. The meeting of these two titans was less a handshake of kindred spirits and more the opening clash of a fundamental ideological war. Edison, a pragmatic inventor who relied on relentless trial and error, saw electricity as a business. His system, direct current or DC, was simple. Imagine a river flowing steadily and relentlessly in one single direction. That was DC. It worked. It powered his revolutionary light bulbs, but it had a crippling flaw. This river couldn't travel far without losing its power. To light a city, you would need a power plant every square mile, a prohibitively expensive and inefficient nightmare. Edison was entrenched, having invested millions in the copper wire infrastructure for his DC empire. He wasn't interested in a new river. He just wanted to build more buckets for his own. Tesla, the theoretician who built perfect machines in his mind, saw electricity as a force of nature to be harnessed in its most elegant form. His concept, alternating current, or AC, was different. Picture the tide of the ocean, ebbing and flowing, shifting direction in a powerful, rhythmic cycle. This very oscillation was the key. Through a device called a transformer, AC's voltage could be cranked up to incredibly high levels for efficient transmission over hundreds of miles, then stepped down to a safe voltage for use in homes and factories. It was inherently superior, but to Edison, it was a direct threat. Initially, Edison hired Tesla, impressed by his fierce intellect and tireless work ethic. He set him a daunting task: to improve the design of his DC dynamos. According to Tesla, Edison, frustrated with the inefficiencies of his own systems, offhandedly remarked, "There's $50,000 in it for you if you can do it." Tesla threw himself into the work, and in a matter of months, he delivered a suite of groundbreaking improvements that significantly boosted the dynamo's performance and output. When he asked about the promised $50,000, Edison reportedly laughed it off. "Tesla," he said, "you don't understand our American humor." He offered a small raise instead. The betrayal was profound. It wasn't just about the money. It was a dismissal of his genius, a reduction of his world-changing potential to a punchline. Tesla quit on the spot. This personal rift exploded into a full-scale corporate war, famously dubbed the War of the Currents. And Edison, the established king, fought dirty. He launched a vicious public fear campaign against AC, labeling it the death current. To prove his point, he and his associates publicly electrocuted stray dogs, cats, and even an aging circus elephant named Topsy using AC power, staging gruesome public demonstrations to terrify the public and lawmakers. In a deeply cynical move, he even secretly funded the development of the first electric chair, ensuring it used Westinghouse's AC generators to forever link his rival's technology with death in the public's mind. But Tesla was no longer fighting alone. He had found a believer, a visionary industrialist named George Westinghouse. Westinghouse, a formidable inventor and businessman in his own right, immediately saw the breathtaking potential of Tesla's AC motor and patents. He saw the tide that could power a nation. In 1888, he licensed Tesla's patents for $60,000, plus a generous stock package, and most importantly, a royalty of $2.50 for every horsepower of AC capacity sold. This partnership was the catalyst. The war was now a duel between the Edison General Electric Company and the Westinghouse Electric Corporation, with Tesla's mind as the ultimate weapon. The turning point came in 1893 at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, a glittering white city meant to showcase American progress. The contract to illuminate the entire fair was up for grabs. Edison bid aggressively, but his DC system was simply outmatched. The Westinghouse-Tesla consortium underbid him and won. When President Grover Cleveland touched a golden key, hundreds of thousands of Tesla's AC-powered lights erupted into brilliance, bathing the fairgrounds in a radiance never before seen. It was no longer a scientific debate, it was a public spectacle. Over 27 million visitors saw with their own eyes that the future was bright, and it was powered by alternating current. The final decisive victory came at Niagara Falls. Harnessing the raw power of the cataract had been a dream for generations. A powerful syndicate of bankers had to choose a technology. The success at the Chicago Fair made the decision clear. In a stunning blow to Edison, they awarded the contract to Westinghouse and Tesla to build the world's first large-scale AC power plant. In 1896, the switches were thrown, and AC power surged from Niagara Falls, traveling over 20 miles to light up the city of Buffalo, New York. It was an undeniable, monumental triumph. The War of the Currents was over. Tesla and Westinghouse had won. The AC system they championed would become the backbone of the entire modern world, a system that, to this day, powers our lives. And standing there, watching his vision become reality, Tesla stood at the absolute pinnacle of his life, a king gazing upon his kingdom. But for a man who lived among the clouds, the fall back to earth would be devastating. The triumph at Niagara Falls should have been the beginning of an era of unimaginable wealth and influence for Nikola Tesla. He stood at the zenith of his career, the undisputed victor in the war that shaped the modern world. His partnership with George Westinghouse was the engine of this success, and it was bound by a contract that promised to make Tesla one of the richest men on the planet. For every single horsepower of AC electrical capacity that the Westinghouse Corporation sold, Tesla was to receive a royalty of $2.50. In the booming age of electrification, as entire cities converted to AC power, this was not merely a revenue stream, it was a financial tidal wave. Conservative estimates suggest that, over time, this clause alone would have earned him over $12 million, a sum equivalent to more than $300 million today. Had he held on to it, he would have likely become the world's first billionaire, his name synonymous not just with genius, but with untold riches. But fate, and Tesla's own quixotic nature, intervened with brutal swiftness. The very war of the currents that Tesla had won had nearly bankrupted the Westinghouse Electric Corporation. The costly battle of underbidding Edison, the immense capital required to build new infrastructure, and the legal fights had pushed the company to the brink. It was drowning in debt, to the tune of $10 million. George Westinghouse, the man who had staked his entire enterprise on Tesla's dream, was facing utter financial ruin. In 1897, he made a solemn, humiliating pilgrimage to Tesla's laboratory. He laid out the grim numbers with stark honesty. The company could not survive if it had to honor the massive, accumulating royalty payments. He wasn't asking as a businessman. He was pleading as a friend and partner, desperate to save the life work of thousands of employees and the future of the technology they had built together. He made a desperate appeal to Tesla's conscience. "Your decision," Westinghouse told him, his voice heavy with the weight of impending collapse, "will determine the future of the Westinghouse Company." Tesla, the man who dreamed in visions of a connected, enlightened world, was faced with a choice that defined the very core of his character. On one side was secured, lifelong wealth beyond the dreams of avarice. On the other was the survival of the company that had believed in him when Edison had mocked him, and the well-being of the friend who had backed his vision with every resource he had. In a single breathtaking act of idealism that would baffle capitalists for a century to come, Nikola Tesla made his decision. He reached for the contract that guaranteed his fortune, and in a gesture of almost mythical magnanimity, he tore it to pieces. He willingly relinquished his claim to the $12 million in future royalties. He could not bear, he explained, to see the company that bore his friend's name, the vessel for his own world-changing ideas, be destroyed for the sake of money. "You have been my friend," Tesla told a stunned Westinghouse. "You believed in me when others had no faith. I will not let you down now. Your company must survive." To save Westinghouse, he sacrificed a fortune. In return, Westinghouse, in a gesture of gratitude, paid Tesla a single, lump sum payment of $216,000 for the perpetual rights to his AC patents, a fraction of their true worth, but a substantial sum nonetheless, equivalent to over $6 million today. This act of compassion saved the Westinghouse Corporation from immediate extinction, allowing it to reorganize, survive, and ultimately thrive, cementing AC as the global standard. For Tesla, the money provided a comfortable independence, allowing him to fund his own laboratories and pursue the even grander visions now taking shape in his mind. He felt liberated, unshackled from corporate interests, free to invent for the betterment of humanity. He never expressed public regret for this decision, viewing it as a noble act. But this single magnificent tier of a contract would become the defining, tragic hinge of his life. It was the moment the king voluntarily gave away his crown, not knowing that the coming winters would be long, cold, and merciless. The financial safety net that could have funded a lifetime of boundless experimentation and insulated him from future disasters was gone, vanished into the air, like one of the ethereal sparks from his famous coils. The newfound financial independence from the Westinghouse buyout did not lead Tesla to a life of leisure. It unleashed him. Flush with cash and free from corporate oversight, he established a series of sophisticated laboratories in New York, transforming them into modern-day workshops of a sorcerer. These were not merely places of work. They were theaters of the future, where he would host dazzling midnight demonstrations for high society. The rich and famous, from financiers like J.P. Morgan to literary giants like his close friend Mark Twain, flocked to see the magician at work. Twain, famously fascinated by technology, would laugh with childlike delight as Tesla passed millions of volts of electricity through his own body, making fluorescent lamps glow without wires in his hands, all while standing safely within a cage of crackling, singing lightning, his magnificent Tesla coil. This period was his most creatively fertile. He was a veritable fountain of invention, holding over 300 patents in his lifetime. He pioneered the principles of neon and fluorescent lighting, bending glass tubes into the names of famous scientists and making them glow with ethereal light. He developed the bladeless Tesla turbine, a marvel of engineering that used a series of smooth, spinning disks and the physics of boundary adhesion to run with incredible efficiency. He experimented with shadow graphs, unknowingly laying the groundwork for X-ray technology years before Wilhelm Röntgen's official discovery. A haunting early X-ray image of his own hand, with its skeletal structure clearly visible, remains a testament to his fearless curiosity. In a stunning display at Madison Square Garden in 1898, he unveiled Teleautomaton, a small, radio-controlled boat. Using a box with several levers, he could command the vessel to move, flash its lights, and even fire tiny torpedoes. The crowd was baffled, some accusing him of witchcraft or telepathy. He had, in effect, invented the remote control and the foundation for all robotics and drone technology to come. But his grandest vision, the one that consumed his every waking thought, was wireless communication and the global transmission of free energy. He dreamed of a world interconnected by invisible waves, where a person could instantly communicate across oceans, where news and images could be broadcast to handheld devices, and where the very energy of the planet could be tapped and distributed to all of humanity for free. To achieve this, he began constructing his magnum opus, his legacy, and ultimately his tomb, the Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island. This was no ordinary structure. It was a colossal wooden skeleton rising 187 feet into the sky, crowned by a gigantic mushroom-shaped hemispherical cap. Beneath it, a brick laboratory housed a powerful 200-kilowatt oscillator. The tower was designed to be a global resonator. Tesla's plan was to pump immense electrical energy into the Earth itself, using its own resonant frequency to create standing waves that could carry information and power to any point on the globe. A simple, grounded receiver, he claimed, could tap into this limitless reservoir. Yet this vision was his undoing. To fund this colossal project, he turned to the most powerful man he knew, J.P. Morgan. He secured $150,000 from the financier, but in a fatal miscalculation, he passionately sold the project not on its revolutionary potential for wireless energy, but on its commercial application as a world telegraphy system. Morgan, seeing a rival to Marconi's radio and a potential monopoly on global communication, agreed. But as construction dragged on and costs soared, Morgan grew suspicious when he finally understood that Tesla's true goal was not a profitable messaging service, but the wireless distribution of free energy, a concept that threatened the very foundations of Morgan's capitalist empire. The funding was immediately and ruthlessly cut off. No other investor would touch a project that promised to make electricity unmetered and unprofitable. The abandoned Wardenclyffe Tower stood for years as a stark, skeletal monument to a shattered dream, a lightning rod for Tesla's despair. In a cruel twist of fate, at the same time, the U.S. Patent Office inexplicably reversed its own previous rulings and awarded Guglielmo Marconi the patent for the invention of the radio, despite it relying heavily on Tesla's work. With Marconi's transatlantic signal in 1901 and now with the full backing of Edison, Morgan, and the scientific establishment, the Italian inventor received the glory and the Nobel Prize in 1911. Tesla was left with nothing but lawsuits and debts. In 1917, the Wardenclyffe Tower was dynamited for scrap metal to pay off his creditors. The collapse was not just financial, it was spiritual. The man who had once illuminated the world and commanded lightning saw his greatest dream literally reduced to rubble, his name beginning its long, slow fade into the shadows of the very history he had helped to write. The demolition of Wardenclyffe Tower was more than the destruction of a laboratory. It was the implosion of a universe. The collapse was not merely financial or professional. It was a metaphysical shattering of Tesla's spirit. The man who had once stood as a colossus astride the scientific world, whose very name was synonymous with the future, now found himself a ghost haunting the corridors of his own former glory. The world, which had once marveled at his genius, now increasingly viewed him as an eccentric relic, a prophet of impossible tomorrows. And as the 20th century marched forward with its world wars and roaring 20s, Tesla, the architect of the modern electrical age, began his long, slow retreat into a self-imposed exile from the very society he had sought to uplift. The years following the loss of Wardenclyffe were a study in accelerating isolation. His mental health, always delicate and intertwined with his brilliant neurodivergence, began to deteriorate under the weight of repeated betrayals and public ridicule. The visions that had once been the engine of his creativity now sometimes morphed into sources of torment. He developed severe obsessive-compulsive disorders born from a lifelong germophobia that was now spiraling out of control. He demanded a stack of exactly 18 freshly laundered napkins at every meal and would fastidiously clean his dining utensils with precisely 18 wipes before eating. He was consumed by a fixation on the number 3 and its multiples, performing rituals in sets of 3 and choosing hotel rooms divisible by 3. He could not bear to shake hands or touch another person's hair, terrified of the microscopic life teeming on their skin. His physical appearance became as gaunt and ethereal as his ideas. He moved through the streets of New York, a tall, spectral figure dressed in elegant but worn-out suits, avoiding human contact. His only companions, the pigeons of the city. He had always found solace in them, but now this fondness escalated into a profound, all-consuming obsession. He would daily pilgrimage to St. Patrick's Cathedral and the New York Public Library to feed his beloved birds, claiming he could communicate with them. He once spent over $2,000, a small fortune at the time, to heal a wounded white pigeon with a broken wing and leg, nursing it back to health in his hotel room. He spoke of this particular pigeon with a reverence usually reserved for a soulmate. "I loved that pigeon as a man loves a woman, and she loved me," he would later confess. "As long as I had her, there was a purpose to my life." When the white pigeon finally died, he claimed he saw a powerful light emanating from her eyes just before her passing, and he knew his life's work was truly finished. In 1933, at the age of 77, he took up permanent residence in room 3327 of the Hotel New Yorker. The Westinghouse Corporation, perhaps out of a lingering sense of debt or pity for the man who had saved them, hired him as a consultant and quietly agreed to pay his rent. He lived there, a recluse in a 2-room suite, for the final decade of his life. His diet dwindled to a meager subsistence of warm milk and Nabisco crackers, which he believed was the perfect, sterile food for his constitution. His laboratory was now the confines of his mind and the pages of his notebooks, where he continued to sketch out fantastical, world-altering inventions that would never be built. A peace ray, or death beam, which he called Teleforce, that he claimed could end all war by making invasion impossible. A particle beam weapon that presaged the Strategic Defense Initiative by half a century. Thought cameras that could photograph images from the human brain, and ways to tap into the cosmic primary solar rays that he believed held infinite energy. He became increasingly paranoid, convinced that others were stealing his ideas and that Martian signals were being sent to him personally. He would sometimes summon reporters to his hotel room to announce these grand, improbable inventions, and the press, which had once chronicled his triumphs, now portrayed him as a mad scientist, a caricature of his former self. They came for the sensational quotes, not the scientific breakthroughs. The man who had given the world the bedrock of its power system was now a source of amusement. On the morning of January 7, 1943, a maid entered room 3327, ignoring the "Do Not Disturb" sign that had been on the door for 2 days. She found the 86-year-old Tesla lying peacefully in his bed. He had died alone, likely of a coronary thrombosis, 2 days prior. His body was discovered by a hotel employee, not a friend or family member. The scene was a poignant portrait of his final years. The room was filled with sheaves of complex mathematical calculations and detailed schematics for his death beam, his final desperate attempt to secure relevance and funding from the U.S. War Department. He died as he had lived his last decade, brilliant, indebted, and utterly alone. The subsequent FBI investigation into his papers, fueled by fears that his death beam might be a tangible weapon that could fall into enemy hands, only added a final, surreal layer to his legacy. J. Edgar Hoover declared his effects most secret, though they were ultimately deemed to be theoretical and not a working blueprint. So, why did one of the greatest inventors of all time fade into obscurity and die penniless? You could point to a cascade of misfortunes: the lab fire of 1895, Edison's ruthless campaigns, Marconi's theft of the radio patent, Morgan's withdrawal of funding. But the core reason is more profound and tragic. Nikola Tesla was an idealist in a world of capitalists. He was a man who believed in the power of an idea for its own sake, for the betterment of humanity, not for its market potential. He made decisions that no pragmatic businessman would ever make. He tore up a contract worth hundreds of millions. He pursued wireless free energy in a world run on metered consumption. He was a visionary who saw the interconnectedness of the planet a century before the internet. But he could not navigate the petty, greedy, and short-sighted motivations of the men who controlled its purse strings. His mother had called him a child of light, and she was right. He was a brilliant, fleeting flash of illumination that showed the world a possible future, a path not taken. He illuminated the darkness but could not sustain his own glow in a world that preferred to remain comfortably, profitably in the shadows. His tragedy was not that he failed, but that the world was not yet worthy of his success. And in the hum of every power line, in the invisible waves that carry our voices and data through the air, his ghost whispers, a permanent, pulsating reminder of the light that once was and the light that could have been.